Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June the 15th, 2023 first residential committee meeting. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we're going to begin with roll call. And I'm going to start with James Worthington.
Present.
Chris Henderson.
Present.
Oh, skipped over my vice chair, Kelly Robinson.
Present.
Mr. Robinson.
Present.
Allison Duncan.
Present.
Phil Schaefer.
Present.
Travis McDonald.
Present.
And Jonathan Womack.
This is Johanna Womack.
Oh, Johanna Womack. Sorry.
I'm here.
I got putting on my glasses. I need to look down with them. Okay. Looks like we have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and begin this meeting. I'd like to start by approving the previous minutes from the previous minutes were from the December 7th, 2022. Has everyone had a chance to look over those minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Are there any changes to those minutes or any deletions that would need to be made?
So moved to adopt.
Okay. We got a motion to accept those minutes. May I get a second, please?
Second.
All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? There be none. The minutes are stand approved. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you, James.
Okay. Well, I think first off, I think you've got a pretty good handle of what everybody does here, but I want our team to kind of go through just quick introductions of who they are and what they do, just so you have a little better handle of it. But I'll start with myself. I'm James Worthington, and I'm oversee development services, which is an umbrella of a number of departments, including engineering, planning and zoning, occupational tax, building, code enforcement, GIS, property management, and courthouse maintenance. And then I guess we'll move on to Allison.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Allison Duncan. Sorry, my camera's at a funny angle. I'm the planning and zoning manager. So that includes planning and zoning, as well as occupational tax. And I have an awesome team of about 7 folks. And we pull through a lot of work in this office, run a lot of public meetings, a lot of community meetings. We're just finishing up our comprehensive plan. So you're gonna get a copy of the comprehensive plan that's gonna show up in your office here today or tomorrow. And look forward to presenting to y'all here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Travis?
Hey, good morning. I'm Travis McDonald. I'm the Assistant County Engineer. The engineering department is responsible for a lot of environmental protection regulations and tree conservation. We're also kind of a central contact point for developers and engineers as they're trying to get development plans approved through the county.
Chris, are you here? I heard.
Yes, I'm here today. I'm Chris Henderson, Chief Building Official, in charge of permitting, in charge of inspection processing. That's pretty much it.
Let's see. Johanna?
I'm Johanna Womack. I am the clerk for the Planning and Zoning Board. I handle applications for rezonings, special use permits and variances, as well as other administrative duties.
Bill?
Howdy. So zoning administrator Phil Schaefer. I handle all kinds of current planning, subdivision review, planning review, case write-ups, dealing with the public at the front counter, all the wonderful stuff we do on a day-to-day basis. And any questions, happy to answer anytime you have them. Just holler at us. We're all here.
All right, thank you. And Jaquel?
Good morning, everybody. Jaquel Johnson, planner. Quick overview staff reports, answering questions, assist with rezoning, special use permits, all front counter business. Oh, what else? And anything else that a planner normally does.
All right, thank you. I don't think I left off any of my folks. All right, so we will move on to discussion items. The first thing I had was a presentation and discussion on housing data within Douglas County, and that's by Allison Duncan. This is some of this will be a recap of information from our last meeting, but since we've had an administration change within this committee, we thought it would be wise to go back over that just for your benefit. So, Allison, you've got the floor.
All right, thank you. I am trying to find where I can share my screen. Oh, here we go. Sorry, that was I was having a bit of a slow.
Yeah, should be a green button on the bottom.
Got it. Can y'all see that slide?
Yes.
All right. So thanks for the opportunity to share this. I'm also going to turn my video off just because sometimes it'll freeze while I'm presenting, and that can be awkward. But thanks for the opportunity to kind of circle back around and share some of the data that we had brought forward last year. I know we've got some new folks here this year, so I'm going to give a quick recap of the information we presented in September and December last year. At that time, the committee was exploring the option of moving forward with reducing our minimum house size for residential. I don't think that we came to any consensus about a path forward, but I'll share some of that data and then give you a little bit more information of kind of what is on my radar in terms of housing. So let's see if I can get this. Let's see if I can get this moving. Okay, so like I said, key takeaways from the September and December meeting, the key opportunities from the comprehensive plan update, and then I'm going to conclude with other issues and trends that I think impact our housing stock in the county. So y'all hold on, this is going to be super exciting. And if you have any questions as we go, please interrupt me because I love the discussion about this topic, as y'all know. So if anybody kind of wants to know what I think is going on with housing, this slide says it all. You may have seen this when Jim Skinner presented to our Planning and Zoning Board and Board of Commissioners work session. But what this slide is showing you is just housing permits in Georgia overall, right? So they have normalized the data to take into account population growth. Around 1960, Metro Atlanta was 1 million people, and in the 2010s, we were at 6 million people. But overall, just to underscore, this is total housing permits in Georgia. And what this is showing you is that basically in the 2010s, we issued a fraction of residential building permits, compared to what we had done in the decades prior, right? So I think that right now we have a real supply and demand issue going on with our housing. And then this is kind of hot off the press. I just got this information yesterday from ARC where they were kind of giving a snapshot of overall development pressures, right? And I think the key takeaway from this is that residential building permits are down by 59% in Metro Atlanta, right? So when we kind of compare that 2010s and where we are now, you can see kind of the overall share. I've highlighted Douglas here. Should make a note that this includes all building permits for residential types, both in the cities and counties. So this isn't just single family detached. This is single family detached. This is apartments, townhomes, all of that. And that's kind of the data that you're seeing in some of the number, but we're basically, looking at a shortfall also to where we had been previously. So there are definitely other factors that are, limiting kind of and creating some of the challenges that we're having with housing. And I'll speak to that a little bit. But generally speaking, if anybody kind of wants to know what I think is going on with housing, I think it's a big picture supply and demand issue. Any questions or thoughts about that? If not, I can just keep on going.
No, that's good. That's a good chart.
Yeah. And we'll certainly make all this information available to share with you. But if you hear nothing else, right, for the next 20 slides or so, that's the thing I wanted to put out there right up front. When we were talking in September, right, there was a question about our 1,800 square foot minimum residential building size. And Chris or James can kind of chime in on that. But I think pretty much if you're looking to build a single family detached dwelling in Douglas County, 1,800 square foot was established, as kind of the minimum residential building size. We do have zoning categories that encourage a variety of housing types. So that's going to include like townhomes, apartments, things of that nature. But for any single family detached, you're really looking at 1,800 square feet. The plan unit development will give you some flexibility, so you can vary your lot sizes and your residential square footage through the plan unit development. But I'm going to show you a chart, basically looking at our zoning regulations from 1974 to the present. Douglas County, I think, starts zoning in a real way around 1968. And of course, you can come to my office and see all of these old plans and codes if you're interested. But as we started looking at this square footage, what we realized is that, probably if you're looking at the 1970s, our minimum residential square footage size, again, single family detached only, would be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,400 square feet. And you can see it's fluctuated over time. In 2004, when we did the big zoning code update, it came in at somewhere between 1,300 and 1,500 square feet. And then in 2005, it was bumped up to 1,800 square feet. And that's basically where the minimum has been since then. When we look at our building permit data, and this was just an analysis that we performed, back in September to just kind of understand, again, how much of this is market driven versus how much of this is code driven. And so what you have there is, starting in 2018 all the way through the first quarter of 2023, and you can see that the number of single family residential permits issued has fluctuated a little bit, but the trend that we see is that basically it's market demand that's limiting the size of square footage more so than our code minimums, right? The vast majority, of our housing is coming in at square footages that are, much larger than 1,900 square feet, which was the proxy that I used for anything kind of between that 1,800 and 1,900 square foot, range. So again, a fraction of our permits coming in are really for anything smaller. So we think a lot of the demand, for larger housing here in Douglas County is market driven. And I don't know if Chris or James, y'all have anything to add before I move off of that permit data, or any questions from anybody else?
I'll add just want to reiterate that, so the 1,900 square foot number was used here as kind of an indicator of folks that are not trying to hit the minimum. So the 1,800 to 1,900 specifically, but really 18 to say 1,850 are folks trying to just, barely make the minimum. So you can see the data points that the bulk of these houses are all significantly higher than the minimum. So it's not the minimum being the issue. And then I'll also add, on minimum square footages, there are a few exceptions to being able to build less than 1,800. If you're rebuilding a house that is burned or in an old, neighborhood from the 70s and all the houses are 1,000 square feet, you do not have to build the 1,800. It's those kind of approvals come through me, but there are a few exceptions. So just want to put that out there as well.
I was about to ask that question of what happens if one of the older houses was to burn. Could it be rebuilt to the same size, or was it going to be required to be 1,800?
Yeah, so typically we'll allow the exact same footprint to be rebuilt. And then if there is a vacant lot in some of the housing subdivisions from, say, the 70s, we can look at the sizes of the homes in the vicinity of it and kind of average those out and allow that to be done also. We don't get very many of those because there's just not many buildable lots from old subdivisions left, but every once in a while, once a year, we'll get one of those.
Right, and I'd also add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, ma'am.
I was just saying, it doesn't, there's other housing types, right? Like manufactured homes. We have some flexibility in the manufactured homes and manufactured home parks. We've been doing a lot of work with our manufactured home parks to improve the overall quality and conditions there. But we recognize that a lot of those came online, in the 1960s and 70s. And so they're kind of, we try to be flexible in working with, those neighborhoods to kind of keep that stock safe and viable going forward. And then we've seen an uptick in the trend, for apartments, townhomes, and other type of like cottage and cluster development. And so that those do not have to meet the 1,800 square foot minimums. But yeah, other questions or comments on this one?
Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, go ahead, Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah, to your point, I get market driven, market demand, 1,800 minimum. What is that's the county's 1,800 minimum square foot. What is the city's? Is it the same or is it different?
I believe the city is 1,500 square feet.
All right, so that's a good data point. All right, so and what I heard you say manufactured home, that's like mobile homes. They're separate.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're protected. All right, I'm fine. Leave that community alone. But I'm coming back to this the difference between the 18 and the, you said 1500 or 1550?
I believe the city of Douglasville is 1500.
It's 1500. And how long has theirs been that? Has it always been there? I heard ours, turned in 2005 became the minimum, and especially James in 09 when I came on board, we were talking about 3,000 square foot, half acre, 3 acres, that type of thing, 3,000 square feet. Has yours always been that way? I'm just trying to reconcile the history and the trajectory of the two municipalities.
I haven't looked into the history. I do have a slide. I don't have it in this deck, but we did use it back in the fall, and I can certainly send it to you, where we looked at the current square footage minimums of surrounding communities to see if we were just like way out of line or if we were in line. So I'm happy to follow up with that information. I didn't have the ready access to the historical zoning codes for those other communities. We just looked at where we were today. I would imagine it changed over time, but I don't know that for a fact. And if you needed us to track down that information, we would certainly do our best to work with the city to get that information from them.
The historical is less, but just for the record, what do you recall? And you don't have to go get the slide right now. I'm not looking for that. But where do we stand in comparison to other surrounding counties, just to the best you can in this conversation?
So again, I think that we were in line based on our development patterns, right? One of the things that limits our development is going to be the availability of sewer. Right, and so the septic, right, which is by far the most common sewage treatment method for single family in the county, is going to require a little bit of a larger lot size, and I think with that comes a little bit of a larger house. Now, one of the things that I'll show you a little bit later on this presentation is there are options, for areas that have sewer that we could look at, single family clustering type development, and I'll share a couple models of that are, here local. But I think when it came to single family, there were still communities that for certain neighborhoods, particularly those that had sewer, you could do houses between 1,000 and 1,200 square feet. So I'm thinking like Cobb County and South Fulton, I think, had a little bit of that. In like Chattahoochee Hills, for example, they don't have a minimum residential house size, but their minimum lot size is 20 acres, right? So I'll just leave that there and let y'all kind of think about that for a minute. And, but generally speaking, other communities, we saw that we were in line, with like, say, a Fayette County, where you have large areas that are largely unsewered, so larger lot development.
No, that's good enough. I want you to keep going with your presentation. Mr. Chair, I yield. Thank you.
Hey, Allison, quick question. I'm looking here at this in 2022. I noticed that's just through May 31st. Do we know that actually how many residential permits were issued throughout the total?
That should be, I just changed that this morning. That should be all of 2022.
That's all of 2022.
Yeah, no, I apologize. When I presented this back in September, we only had numbers through May 31st. Now, I gotta be honest with you, Chris Henderson and I spent a minute on this number. So a couple of caveats, and I invite Chris to add anything that he would have. So this is single family residential building permit issued, right? So this isn't like working through the lag from 2021. This isn't all your mechanical permits for all your inspections. And this doesn't reflect commercial, industrial, multifamily, any of that. And I don't know, Travis may talk about this a little bit in his presentation, but we have seen things slow down, largely in response to coming down off the sort of economic sugar high of the pandemic, as well as the increase, in interest rates. We're definitely seeing that impact what's being delivered. I think Travis or James can add to that. But I would say from our perspective in P&Z, we are not seeing a slowdown in people that are bringing us concept plans, right? So there's still a lot of movement trying to get things lined up for whenever economic conditions are a little more stable, just my opinion. But I think we have seen a slowdown, in the actual number of permits being issued and, new starts coming out of the ground. And I don't know if somebody else, Chris, Travis, or James, y'all want to add to that or correct anything that I've said that you disagree with?
I'm just saying, I'm going to double check those numbers because I don't think that matches what was on my final report for last year. I think we had more than that, so I'm not sure what the...
Yeah, what we were discussing, James, I don't mean to interrupt, was just the new numbers, the new permit issues, okay? We don't have added in there any of the residential permits that were issued for remodels or interiors or mobile homes or any of that is normally in the residential permit issue category. This is just new single family homes.
Gotcha.
What's that total number, guys, again?
So it was, for 2022, it was 103 single-family residential permits issued. And then 21 of those permits were under 1,900 square feet, and 82 permits were larger than the 1,900 square feet. Again, we can certainly go through these numbers. I pulled this together and I asked Chris, because I said, this number feels low to me. But I think as he and I kind of sorted through, you know, to his point, it doesn't include, you know, remodel, manufactured home, apartments, townhomes. It's just like a new house coming out of the ground, and it's just what was issued. So it's not reflecting numbers of like COs or anything along those lines. So, but we can go back and take a look.
Just for reference, I was showing 166 for that, which is still very low compared to the previous numbers. My 2021 number and 2020 numbers look like they match their 2019 matches, 2018 matches. So I mean, it was still low. But I was showing 222 residential grading permits, which would typically be the beginning of construction of new home type thing. It doesn't automatically mean that. They could just be clearing, but so there is potential there for things that we're catching up maybe this year. So we'll have to double check into that.
Right. Yeah. And the way that we're presenting the data may make it seem a little, you know, bare bones, but we strictly looked at all of the numbers of issued permits. So issued new single family detached permits. So, but yeah, well, we can always go back and go through this. I love going through data. So, what other questions? Anything else?
Yeah, just one more to your point, so and not get off task, but these are 103, somewhere between 103 and 200, give or take, I got it, houses, single family. Is there a correlated apartment units in comparison in 2022 that goes alongside that? In other words, I get single family, and I get how many, in other words, how many apartments and how many units were built in 2022 in Douglas?
Sure, we can certainly pull that number together. This conversation that we were having, just as a recap from September, was mostly focused on if we wanted to change our minimum square footage for residential. But if you would like us to follow up with a full report of all the different, you know, types, we absolutely can do that.
Nope, we're good. Keep going. I got it.
Okay.
I'll take it offline. Good.
All right, perfect. So, you know, so to that point, you know, that this was the conversation we had in September, right? And so then in December, we came back to provide a little bit of a deeper dive, you know. So one of the things that we found is that residential building footprints do cluster geographically. They're correlated to the age of the structure, right? That's a direct link back to that table I showed you where like what those minimums were between the 70s, you know, and the 2000s. And then I'm going to share with you some good local examples of cluster development, but I want to make it clear that, you know, cluster housing doesn't automatically translate into affordable housing, right? So as we're kind of thinking about this conversation, if we want to tweak, you know, our minimum square footage, let's make sure we're clear on the goals, you know, because I think that sometimes we bounce around with a lot of different things. When we analyze residential square footages, and I know this map is a little bit hard to see at this scale, you know, but the areas in orange, which kind of are sort of this band here clustered around the city of Douglasville, you know, those are basically where we saw square footages that were under 1,800 square feet, right? And then this chart is a breakdown of like how many units, you know, are between 483 and 996, between 1,000, you know, and 1,100, and so forth and so on, right? So you can kind of see the overall trend as we're looking at total housing units, again, single family detached only, right? So single family detached. And you can kind of see that the further out you get into the county, the more you start getting into those larger homes. That's going to be a function, I think, of the year that they were built, and the regulations that were in place, but also a function of those larger lot sizes required, you know, because of the availability of sewer. So we did start looking at like, you know, what would be the possibilities if we wanted to do, you know, infill housing or cluster housing? Would that be an appropriate thing countywide? Would there be certain areas that we would target, you know, to sort of say that this is more in keeping with the historic building stock that we have in the area? And so we started looking at some of those options. This is in Clarkston. It's a tiny home community, and it's like a seriously tiny home community. Jaquel can chime in because he put a lot of this together, but I think they had units as small as 300 square feet. And I think maybe the largest comes in around 500 or 600 square feet. But so this is an example of a tiny home community that was built in Clarkston. We also have Jim Chapman. He had proposed a project in Douglas County. He has since decided to not build that project, but he does have communities in Loganville and Hampton, right? And so he builds more of an attached cottage product for his age-targeted communities. And then this is an example from Madison, Georgia, which was done by the Development Authority. It was the city and the Development Authority working together to take what was basically 1 to 2 acres of land in town and do infill development. And so this is the front of the house, kind of an example. And then this is an image of, sort of what that looks like on the ground. But these were all smaller infill footprint houses in kind of their historic downtown area. And then we just kind of shared a couple of examples, of some new urbanism and traditional neighborhood development. So that's going to be something like Serenbe, which is in Chattahoochee Hills, or Trilith. It was originally Pine Woods. You may have heard it as Pine Woods. That was built around the movie studio in Fayetteville. And so those are two examples of super cluster kind of type development with a mix of residential, commercial, amenities, and a little bit of higher density. For the most part, these are all single family. So again, as we move in this direction, this is where we start, kind of getting away from that affordability conversation, right? And so just an example of these are communities where the price per square foot, will kind of blow you away. But there's a commensurate sort of architectural design and landscape requirement. And I'll get to that here in a minute. And then finally, Clarks Grove in Covington, Georgia, and North Grove in Peachtree. That's the Peachtree Center. It should be Peachtree City, Georgia. I apologize. I made that same mistake in December. Or just some other examples of, again, where you can get, housing on smaller footprints or smaller housing overall in a kind of more compact area. So I share all this to say, you don't have to go to, the West Coast or Portland or, any of those places to kind of get really good quality, dense housing. We do have good models here if we wanted to move in that direction. Questions on any of that before I jump into the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, but that's right. There's the inflection point. There's perhaps a perception or a mindset that believes that smaller means less is cheaper, and we've had those conversations about from leads, how do we improve quality. It's the language that we use to recognize is that okay, we want a smaller lot size, but we still want quality. No different than our seniors. They sell their houses, they have equity, they want a smaller size. It doesn't mean it's cheaper. It doesn't make it affordable. That language, we need to get rid of that language. We're getting rid of words. Let's get rid of that word that says that okay, affordability means cheap. It doesn't. And it's just I'm listening to this okay, so from a policy perspective, all right, so how are we going to do this? My question is, why did Jim Chapman, if you don't know, why did they not do that senior community? What happened?
It was primarily because of the site conditions. So there's some environmental constraints and there's a lot of granite on that property. And so at the end of the day, I think they just couldn't make it work financially. I will share a map at the end of the presentation that I'm super excited about because as part of the comprehensive plan update, we asked our consultants to map all of the granite, that could potentially be a challenge. I think as Phil and Jaquel will attest to, that is the conversation that we were having, with folks, is that so many of the properties that you can develop now are hard to develop, right? Because of environmental constraints, the granite, getting sewer pipes to run through granite, the blasting that has to be done. We saw that with Trayton Homes, right? Trayton Homes, I think, Phil can help me out with this, but I think they ended up losing about 20 lots from their original proposal because they just hit a lot of granite and had a lot of site challenges. So that is a very common conversation we're having with folks now. And part of the reason we had it mapped as a part of the comprehensive plan process is so that folks will know, right, before they go into it. So
keep going. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So let me jump into the comprehensive plan update. What I'm sharing with you here is kind of the overall takeaway from our community survey, because I think there's some relevant data for housing that I just want to touch on. Again, y'all all are going to have the comprehensive plan in print in your offices. It's already uploaded online, and we will be bringing this to you at the July 6th meeting for our second public hearing to present, kind of the final outcomes. But according to our community survey, we had about 340 responses to our community survey. 46% of the responses were, we prefer to see the county attracting more shops and restaurants and things to do. 47% wanted to see us limit additional warehouses and distribution centers, and 42% wanted to see us support investing in parks, trails, and open space, right? So when we kind of asked the community, what are your priorities? These were the things that rose to the top among all of the other options. And so when we get into the data a little bit more and we ask them, some housing specific questions, we specifically put out there, how much you agree or disagree with the statement. There should be a broader range of housing types in Douglas County, right? And so I've kind of calculated those percentages, but 42% disagree and only 37% kind of agree with that statement. 20% were neutral, right? So there's always that middle ground that I think can go either way. But I share this information, in conjunction with that previous slide that, kind of said to me, the community is paying attention to housing, but their priorities are really like, our overall quality of life and sort of the things that you're bringing in around our neighborhoods. Through the comprehensive plan process, we understood very clearly that people are very attached to their neighborhood, right? And they're very cognizant of what is going on around them. But in terms of bringing new housing diversity, you really kind of got, sort of a middle of the road response from the community in terms of people who are in favor and people who are not in favor. And then when we asked them, to the point Commissioner Robinson was making, would you like to see more design guidelines to control architecture and landscape of new development in Douglas County? This is where we got about 60% of the population agreeing with that, and 25% were neutral. So only about 15% of the community said they didn't want to see that happen. So those are some of the kind of key takeaways through the process that I would share. I think the idea of single family detached cluster options would be the direction we would recommend moving in. I think that when we started talking about apartments and townhomes and things of that nature, we definitely got far more significant pushback, from our steering committee, and from our overall feedback, in this process, which doesn't mean there's not still areas that we're planning for that type of development. I think we just need to be very cognizant, about where it goes. And so I think this slide underscores a fair amount of that. So overall, when we ask them about, what would you like to see in terms of a range of housing, traditional single family still carried the day, and then housing for seniors at more affordable price points with smaller and more affordable single family homes. That was really where, that I think the tipping point, which is why I would kind of suggest we look at our options for single family and make sure that we're providing some flexibility there. Because as we get into townhomes, duplexes, and apartments, we start to see, again, what is sort of a predictable response from the community. But I think it's a valid response that they've seen a lot of apartments going in, and concerns about traffic and crime and things that may come along with sort of a different housing type. I think we have to kind of balance all of that, make sure that we're planning areas that are appropriate while we're also preserving our existing single family neighborhoods. So to that extent, our character areas, is something that we kind of introduced countywide for the first time, where we took big swaths of the county and we sort of broke it out and said, hey, these all kind of hang together, whether it's for policy reasons or, the historic development pattern, or whether it's just a building type like industrial and mixed use versus single family residential. So we have the opportunity to use our character areas, our future land use, and our zoning, and make sure that we're kind of taking a deep dive into how all of those relate and make sure that they line up, right, to the point of making sure that we're planning areas appropriate for all types of development, but keeping that balance. And then I just have a couple of things I'll wrap up on. We did include the countywide trail concept, right? So the idea that we can kind of knit all of those different land use areas together, through options other than just getting in your car to drive everywhere. So we're going to bring some recommendations to y'all about how we can kind of move forward, to implement the trail concept. And this is the map that, Phil and Jaquil will tell you. I think I show everybody this map now, because what you see, these big bands of gray, right? So that's where, we have those granite deposits that I think I can pretty much just point to any parcel that we've had to deal with in the last couple or 3 years. If it's in one of those big bands of gray, we're going to have challenges, and we're going to need to make sure that the development community understands that going forward. So this has been a key asset, as well as, kind of making sure folks understand our watershed restrictions, because that's the key part of what's going to inform development. And so I think Travis is going to kind of pick up where I left off with some, sort of more on the ground data. But I'll just conclude with a couple other issues that we're keeping an eye on. I'd like to thank Alon Mitchell as our summer intern, and she's pulled a lot of this together. But the HSC has done some really good investigative reporting about where single family rental communities are coming online. And so I think that in terms of homeownership as a path to wealth building, right, I think we're seeing some of that pain here in Douglas County, and we can certainly get into that in a much more systematic way. But I contrast that with short-term rentals, because I know short-term rentals were a big issue from kind of a quality of life, kind of nuisance perspective. But when we looked at the numbers, and I want to kind of recognize Jaquil for all the good work he's doing in this space, we have about 190 properties that have been identified as having some kind of level of advertising for a short-term rental, on their property. we've worked through a bunch of those. You know, I think about 30% of those folks we've contacted and they said, oh, no, I'm not doing that anymore. We've had a few folks come through and get, get their entitlement. But I mean, at the end of the day, Douglas County has about 55,000 parcels. So you're still looking at a fraction of 1% of our housing is being used in this way. I'm not sure this is the thing that's taking, single family homes off the market for people who would otherwise want to buy it. But we're staying on top of that. We understand it's a priority of the board, so we're staying on top of that. And then the final thing I'll put out there is Jaquail has been looking into options for the GIC program. That's the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing. So if any of this is super exciting and somebody wanted to step up to be a champion, to see if Douglas County could apply for this program, it's a 3-year program through the state that gives you a lot of technical assistance to really kind of chart your housing future going forward. It's a heavy lift. I've worked with other communities that have done this program, and so you need to have some folks that are like dedicated and bought into this concept to move forward. But just kind of want to leave it there to say if all of this is interesting to you and we want to take it to the next step, this program could be a really good opportunity. So I'm going to stop talking and see if there's any questions or comments before I turn it over to, I think, Travis.
Yeah, I've got one question. Going back to, I'm always interested in what citizens have to say. So one more time, what were the top 3 priorities? We wanted some dining in restaurants, better quality, limit the number of industrial. What was the third one?
Sure. So supporting investment in parks, trails, and open space.
Parks, trails, and open space. So that was their input. Now, I appreciate you guys overlaying the, sort of the map, the character areas. And I'm like, okay, did they know that we got 11 million square feet of industrial sewer already on the books coming?
Right.
So did we ever so is that, did we just ask them outright what they thought, or did we lay them, well, here's the current landscape?
So the question just asked them outright what they thought.
Yeah.
I have a super interesting slide. It's not in this deck, but I have a super interesting slide I can send you that shows industrial development around Metro Atlanta. And I mean, the whole Fulton Industrial, State Route 6 corridor has taken a lot of industrial growth. But I think the conversation we had with communities is like, hey, let's kind of contain it where it is, right? Make sure we're keeping that balance. And then as we plan for expansion, make sure that we're putting, parameters around what that expansion looks like. But again, with the overall kind of protecting those stable single family neighborhoods in mind.
So to that point, Commissioner Alcaraz, we've had those conversations, probably over the years, but more recently, which is, my district is sort of that light industrial I inherited. It's that light blue. I remember when I first came on board, that whole swap, we've got to change this thing from being trucks to being the sectors that Chris Pumphrey put out there, which is like, okay, let's do some studios, let's do some other flex, let's change the dynamics of just straight trucks. And so while we've slowed it through some of the things that we've advocated for, we promote economic development and brought what they call data centers and stuff like that, we still got a lot of pipeline and a lot of things that are already on the book. They're just now getting around to do it. So I guess at some point the board will have that conversation. But Allison or James, we don't have to do it now, but do we still see that as being hot? It's still coming? Because I try to continue in District 2. Don't let that go west. Don't let them mow down the west. But what are y'all seeing on that regard?
James, do you want to chime in on that, or I'm happy to take a stab at that question?
Oh, you take a stab.
Okay, you can correct anything that you disagree with, but I do think that we probably have a couple of 3 more pads that could accommodate that type of development in District 2. My attention has turned more towards making sure that we're building those as sustainably as we possibly can, right? And so, like, for example, the data centers are a huge user of water, right? And I think that we have to make sure that we're planning appropriately for that, because that water just basically runs through to cool those data centers and it comes out on the other side gray water. Yep. So I think that there is a big impact to our water delivery in that area. And I think that there is a big impact to the amount of power that's being drawn down from those, right? So you look at places like Texas that had that problem with their power grid and, making sure that we are planning appropriately for those types of uses, and mitigating kind of the whole resiliency in the system. I think that that's something that as that area has grown, those have maybe been secondary thoughts. We certainly look at the impacts, we go through the DRI reviews, we kind of do all of that stuff, but we want to make sure that the cumulative impact, right? And that's where I kind of see that I don't know that we've looked constructively at the cumulative impact to make sure that we're building in resiliency so that all of those, corporate citizens can be successful sort of going forward. So I would say in District 2, we got maybe 2 or 3 more potential sites that could come online for that. And then as we kind of jump over here to sort of this area on the western side of Douglasville, we're in a good position to plan very differently for that. Of the overall industrial acreage we have, the zoning acreage that we have, I would say it's relatively small to say the residential zoning that we have countywide, but our overall industrial zoning is fairly significant compared to our peers, right? So we've taken a lot of industrial development, more so than I would say some of our peer communities have in terms of raw acreage, but in terms of its comparison to what we have in the county, that is still a fairly small number. 85% of Douglas County is still zoned for single family detached residential development.
So we're concentrated. Yeah, we're deeply concentrated. And again, I know we only got 199 square miles. We got a small footprint, so relative to our peers. So I get it. Thank you for that. Keep going. Yep.
Okay, James, anything you want to add to that, or?
No, well done. I was going to say you did.
He
Much
nailed
better
it.
than I would have answered. Well done. So,
So I think
if there's
I'm
nothing
done unless
else-
there's other questions. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say if there's nothing else, I appreciate all that information, and we'll get this out to you guys so that you can look through this more intensely on your own. But we'll move on to presentation by Travis McDonald, going over some ongoing and upcoming significant projects within the county. So, Travis.
Yeah, thank you, James, and good morning, commissioners and rest of the committee. Give me a second to share my screen. All right, assuming you guys can see that. So
Yes, we see.
all right. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of projects that we have in the pipeline. These are all projects that are either under plan review or under construction right now. And I've kind of broken up the maps into commercial and industrial, and then a separate map for residential. And the map that you have on the screen now is the commercial and industrial projects that we have ongoing. And I've kind of wanted to focus on it in specific corridors. Commercial and industrial development tends to follow the major state routes. So like first I wanted to focus on the Thornton Road corridor, State Route 6, obviously on the east side of the county. And so we go over there, and a lot of it is the industrial warehouses that we've been talking about, and Allison was talking about. These are kind of the last sites that are available for that kind of development in this corridor. But just to put some numbers to it, between Switch and T5 and Stack, those are the 3 major data center projects that we have going on, and those are about 2.5 million square feet of space, of building space between those 3 data centers. And just as a reference point, generally a large warehouse or data center is about 1 million square feet. I would say medium-sized projects are more 500,000 square feet, and smaller warehouse projects are about 250,000 square feet. So we have about 2.5 million square feet of data centers that are currently in the planning stages or under construction. The other projects that you see kind of in the Thornton Road corridor, largely centered on the Douglas Hill Road, Factory Shoals side roads. We have what we call River West 3, which is going to be occupied by Sam's Club. I think that was recently announced. That's a 1.1 million square foot facility. We have a couple new warehouse projects on Rock House Road. Looks like those are combined about another 1 million square feet. We have some that are in plan review and have kind of stalled out with JDA and Riverside Industrial. Those are about 200,000 square foot between them. Strategic Partners is currently under construction right in the area of that Sam's Club warehouse, and they have a I think it's 4 buildings, but that totals 850,000 square feet. So all of those in the Thornton Road corridor, all these projects in this area, we have about 6 million total square feet coming in, and about 2.5 million of that is data centers.
Don't leave that point, and this is something that Allison mentioned earlier, the Thornton, Douglas Hill, Factory Shows. You brought up a good point about water and power. And the fire station, number 9 is right there in that immediate area. And I know we flip-flop, James, our parcels with Georgia Power. And so is that why we had to put the satellite power substation out there to be able to support all this?
So there's multiple power companies feeding that area, but Georgia Power and Greystone feed those.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these facilities out here are large enough users that they fall into a different category where the power companies kind of propose to them the rates they'll take. So they get an option where a typical homeowner is just kind of given who's going to provide their service. But when you get into this size developments,
Yep.
the power providers kind of make a bid, so to speak, for what kind of rates they can provide. They both have multiple substations in those areas.
Yep.
I've not heard directly from from Georgia Power. Greystone I've been in some meetings with them recently where they said they're happy to sell as much power as we want, or customers want to buy. They have no shortage. So.
But so we got the power, but what about Gill and the water? How do we, to Allison's point, so there's power and there's water. Obviously, we're not taking advantage of the sweet water. We're not drawing water from there, so we're drawing it from the Dog River. We're porting it all the way over. I mean, where is the water coming from to support these things?
So there's a intake plant, a secondary plant down off of Riverside that provides some of this. It's actually kind of like a gray water plant where the effluent leaving the treatment plant gets treated and pumped back up to some of these. I know Google particularly has an independent line going up there. And if I recall, I think it was 3 million gallons a day they had capacity for. But there is significant water infrastructure in that area, huge mains. The water mains there they're significant compared to the rest of the county. But WSA is working on a reservoir improvement plan right now, or it's underway. I've heard different estimates, but I think maybe 6 years was the last number I heard from when it will be complete. That will basically triple the capacity of Dog River Reservoir. It's going from somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.7 billion gallons to around 6 or 7 billion gallons. Travis, do you remember any of those specifics?
I don't know the specific numbers, but it sounds like you're in the right range.
Okay.
So we're okay with that. In other words, it won't put us at a tipping point. Our growth, this industrial, these data centers out east are going up. And I know it's going to take time for them to build that water capacity over there. So we're going to be drawing down and draining in the meantime. Just like to put a substation up. This growth will not outstrip our current capacity delivery. We're not at risk, I guess. And we don't have to answer that now, but that would be a question I would want to know. Like, okay, now, to Al's point, are we paying attention to this? Can we handle this? And does it put us in the yellow zone? Not that we're in red. I know we're not going to be in red, but does it put us at a point where, okay, guys, how long is it going to take y'all to build that reservoir? So I'm going to make a note to sort of follow with that offline.
Yeah.
That's something I want to have answered. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll definitely, we've talked about it internally, but the last conversation I had with WSA was that when the reservoir was done, the reservoir was based on a 50-year plan of needs throughout the county. So once the reservoir is in place, that should cover the county for 50 years. I don't know the specifics of planning that went into that future needs. If they planned on extensive growth in these sectors, or if it's based more around residential. I'm not sure of that, but we will check on that.
Right. Keep going, Chuck.
And I do know that while we've been talking to these data centers that are coming online now, WSA has been talking to them about the data centers funding some additional pump stations that are needed in those areas, just to make sure that the water pressures stay high, considering their high usage. And the data centers have been more than willing to do whatever it takes to get the resources that they need. So it's good to see us putting the onus on the developers and the data centers that are coming in to provide those facilities that are needed. All right, so moving on, I also wanted to talk about the Veterans Memorial Corridor, and these are generally smaller industrial facilities, more in the 250,000 square foot warehouse facilities, rather than like the 1 million square foot that we sometimes see in the Thornton corridor. We do have a warehouse planned on North Burnt Hickory Road at about 144,000 square foot. Right down the road on industrial access, Rockefeller's doing one that's about 250,000 square foot, and another one in that same area that's 220,000 square foot. I did put this driving school that's going to be going in on the Veterans Memorial Highway. It's not a whole lot of square feet, but it's just kind of an interesting project. From my understanding, that's kind of a result of Douglas County getting this driver services that's going to be doing truck driving licenses as well. So that school is coming in kind of almost as a direct result of getting that facility in Douglas County. We also have a small industrial park that's going to be going in on Veterans Memorial, kind of on the western side of the county, that I wanted to make y'all aware of. And then we also have the Fairburn Road Highway 92 corridor. Not a lot of projects there, but the ones that we do have are fairly significant. Down on the near the Chattahoochee River, we have a project called Riverview that's 800,000 square feet. That one's just about done, and they may be starting a second building. And then of course we have the movie studio project that's about 500,000 square feet in the Highway 92 corridor. And Kaiser Permanente has approached us about doing a medical office building that's going to be a little over 100,000 square feet. And so just that's something different that we haven't seen a whole lot of before. So all told, we have about 8.5 million square feet of commercial and industrial development coming that's currently in the pipeline. 6 million out of that 8.5 million is in the Thornton corridor. 2.5 of that is data centers. Only about 750,000 is our commercial projects, and a little over 5 million square feet of industrial warehouses. So that's unincorporated Douglas County only. The city has also some significant projects. Microsoft's going into the city, and they have a lot of industrial projects going in on Riverside Parkway as well. Any questions on the commercial and industrial development patterns that we're seeing?
Yeah, just one more. We talked about water. We talked about power. And so we're going back to quality of life and trucks. Now I'm talking about infrastructure. I'm talking about the roads. Now I know they expanded Thornton Road. Thank you, state, the state for giving us that $34 million to help us create those truck printing lanes north of I-20 on Thornton. But listen, Commissioner Alfred, listen to this. Look at it. Wait, what? Out of 8.5 million, 2.5 is data centers, which means it's not a lot of trucks, just water and power. But the rest of that is trucks. And I get it. I mean, it's in play, so I'm not delusional about, well, it's already in play. And its impact on a 2-lane Riverside, including the city. But the city, he just gave us our data. you put that on top of them, like, okay, look at this. We got to anticipate this. And so back to planning is to have the foresight, say, okay, I hear y'all. Thank you for the data. The numbers don't lie. And how do we plan for the future to accommodate this? Because that's dense. That's a lot of truck traffic, guys. And in other words, it's only going to get worse before it gets better. It's going to get deeper and heavier. That's a lot of traffic. That's a lot of traffic. So I appreciate you guys giving me this as I now reflect, and as I, move in my other committees, like, ooh, we gotta, this is good data, because we have to plan for this and its impact on our citizens. And that's why I'm always making a comment like, all right, be careful, district folk, y'all develop it right. Be thoughtful. Mine just sort of organic, it just grew like it grew. And yeah, it was some thought, but we just it did what it did. But be thoughtful in how y'all plan the West and the rest of the county, and be strategic. And now you guys are doing that. Y'all helping us get the data and understand it, and I feel good about the future. But I'm looking at, but in the meantime, we're gonna have some pain here in how we help our citizens coexist with this commercial stuff. So guys, this is good stuff that just made me think, and I appreciate that, Travis, with this information. I'm good, guys. Thank you. Keep going.
All right. Next, I'm going to switch to residential developments on a different map. Give me a second. All right, so you should be able to see the residential map now. You can see that the east side of the county has already kind of been built out on the residential components. Most of the residential we're seeing now is more in the central part of the county and around the city limits. Again, I kind of wanted to break it down into various corridors. I'll start with the Highway 92 corridor. So, kind of going from north to south, we have Amabi Townhomes, which was the project that Jim Chapman had originally proposed to us, and it's been picked up by a different developer, and they're trying to make it work. They're currently proposing about 210 lots. And those are townhomes. Bridalwood is currently under construction. You can see them starting their first and I think second sets of townhomes now, just south of the interstate on Highway 92. That's 7 townhomes. We're talking with a developer behind Time Plaza for another 37 townhomes. And the big ones are really Carlton, which is a D.R. Horton development right by Highway 92 and Bomar Road. That's apartments and townhomes. It's 498 total units there. And then the Trails development, which is the Harry Kitchens development, part of right next to Project Silver. They're proposing apartments and townhomes also at 463 total units. So really between we're looking at about 1,160 townhome and apartment units just between those projects that I mentioned there. Also in this corridor, we have some typical single-family residential, Somerset at Aniwaki, which we've done a lot of work with that developer, but we're unsure if they're going to move forward. But that's 300 single-family lots, and then Grove Park. Did that make? Yep. Here on the map, it's at the end of Lake Monroe Road. That's one of those subdivisions that's kind of been sitting around a while. That's 64 lots. So all told, in the Highway 92 corridor, we have 1,700 residential units currently planned or under construction, and just under 1,200, or about 2/3 of those, are townhomes and apartments. And that's in the Highway 92 corridor. We also have the Highway 166 corridor along the south end of the county. Projects there include Holly Springs Unit 8. This is the last phase of the Holly Springs development. And that's going to be about 43 single-family homes. Stonehaven and Windermere are not necessarily pipe farm subdivisions, but they were built, the infrastructure was built before the crash, and they're currently starting to be houses built in there, and that's 115 lots between those. We have some new phases going in St. Andrews, which are going to be 92 single-family lots there. And then this Caps Ferry Road subdivision, which is taking advantage of the sewer that Foxhall and the Preserve are bringing to that area. They're proposing 609 lots there. So in this corridor, we have about 860 lots, and they're all typical single-family detached housing.
Travis, before you move off of that,
Yep.
I just want to point out, so the Stonehaven, Windermere, and Holly Springs kind of grouping there, I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the last of the pre-recession started development that will get finished up, correct?
That's correct. We don't have any other subdivisions that I know of that are bank owned, as a result of bankruptcy. Every vacant subdivision that we have now is owned by a builder or developer that is planning on doing something. They're just picking the right time to do it.
So those are the end of the long era we've had of slow recovery. So that'll finish those up. I just wanted to point that out.
Yep. All right. Moving on to kind of the Chapel Hill corridor. We have the reserve at Chapel Hill here at 39 lots. There are some townhomes going in on Brookmont by Hattie Construction, and that's 83 townhomes. We have Buckingham Terrace, which just got platted and is now starting to build homes. That's on, it's off of Bomar Road. That's 62 lots. And Walters Creek is a new subdivision that's come to us. It's fairly small at 41 lots, for a total of about 225 lots in that corridor. And in the Lee Road corridor, we have Gruber's Lake, Fairhaven, and a second phase of Paces Estates, which are about 300 lots between those. So all told, we have about 3,000 lots or residential units in the planning stages. About 1,700 out of the 3,000 are in Highway 92, the Highway 92 corridor, and that's mostly because we have they have the bulk of the 1,300 to 1,400 townhome and apartment units that are currently in the pipeline. And that's the bulk of the information that I have for you. This isn't a totally comprehensive view of everything that we have going on, but this is kind of the major projects. We also have, smaller commercial developments like car washes and truck parking and that sort of thing. We also have some subdivisions that have some vacant lots, but just, they're kind of pieced here and there, and, aggregate them together, and they kind of affect the data a little bit, but on their own, they don't, there's not a whole lot left in those existing subdivisions. The exception being possibly Whitestone subdivision, which is kind of in the Highway 5 South corridor. They've only built 17 homes out of 155 lots, so they have 130 lots available there in a subdivision that's been around for 15 years, but that's kind of a rarity these days, like James said.
Yeah, and I do know that particular one has been owned by the same owner for at least 10 years now or something. I've discussed it with him. I believe he's just waiting on the right market conditions to come back. I think the last I'd heard from him, he said the townhome market was kind of hot right now, so he was working on that. But when he caught up on that, he was going to come back and catch up on some custom home residential stuff. Those will probably be larger, probably 3,000 square feet and up, kind of a larger custom home style. So
yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot more townhomes than single family, which is against the trend that we've had in Douglas County in previous years. So
Travis, can you send me both of these maps and I will forward them out to everyone on the meeting?
Will do.
Anyone have questions?
Yeah, is that that Whitestone? That's Hattie Construction, also, is it not?
Correct.
Okay. Looking at all those, I just think of all that there at that Fairburn Road corridor, all that coming in. Just my mind's just going to the schools in that area. Because I know some of those older schools have been there forever and they haven't really been expanded much. Just thinking about the impact it's going to have on the schools. Not only that, just the infrastructure in that area. So that's a lot coming on in that one small segregated area right there.
Yeah, Commissioner, I do believe that the school system has a new person that's in charge of some of their planning activities, and Allison and I do have a meeting with them. I think it's next week to start discussing some of these areas that we're seeing high growth potential where they need to start accounting for that.
Yeah, because I know that there's a lot of construction also about to come to Mirror Lake, which I know that's the city of Villarica, but that's also going to impact our Mirror Lake Elementary School, which is already, they've had to add a couple additional trailers, I believe about 4 or 5 years ago. So I know they're at the capacity.
So the school board has a representative on the planning and zoning board. That's Kirk Nicholson. So he's aware of, most of this upcoming, everything that has to go through any kind of rezoning or variance, especially land use, he sees beforehand.
Okay.
So they are at least somewhat aware of everything. It's not, sneaking by them or anything. So any other questions?
Yeah, I want to piggyback on alongside of Commissioner Alcaraz. The data doesn't lie. It's already here. Right. So in addition to water and power and roads and schools, I just had the meeting with the chair and the sheriff on Monday. Talk about their budget. As you know, as chair of finance, let's get ready for the end of the year. Commissioner Alcaraz, right. You gotta protect this. Now, wait a minute. The census says we grew 1,000 people per year from 10 to 20, give or take. We about to drop 3,000 in one moment. Pay attention. It's already in play. It's in play. So we as a board of commissioners, all right, we gotta step back and see, okay, oh boy, we gotta plan this. And so, I welcome your thoughts, and especially with your committee on public safety, say, all right, get ahead of this. It's already here. And again, so it's one of those, like, I get it takes time to build schools. It takes time to expand roads, right? At the point, they're gonna already be here while we're planning and taking 2 and 3 years to build a road or to build a school. We can get funding for that. Like E-Splots or T-Splots, but what do we do in the meantime? And then the manpower impact on obviously our service providers. I get it. It's just something you and I, I'm sure we'll have more conversation as a board. Is the guys, y'all looking at this? This is actually very good data. This is excellent. This is excellent because now it gives us a chance to sort of like, yeah, okay, all right. And so it will help shift how we appropriate, where we focus. And so I'll leave it at that. Commissioner Alcaraz, I know you can hear me quite well. And what I'm saying is that, all right, guys, we got to get this right. We got to fund right. We got to anticipate right. And then we already got we're short on personnel.
Yeah.
We're dropping this many people. It's already in play. But yet we can't even, you hear me? That's a different conversation. But whatever we need to do, we need to do. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys. Keep going. We're good.
All right. Any other questions for Travis?
Good job, Travis. Excellent.
Yeah,
No,
great
sir.
job,
Yeah.
Travis. Good info.
Very
It's
good.
nice to see that on the map, kind of all in one place. That'll be really handy to have, and that should be fairly accurate for at least a number of months. So,
Yeah, James, if you would share that with us also with Commissioner Robinson and I, so that we can when we get back with our peers, they can see this data as well. We can have a good conversation is going to be needed.
I will definitely do that. No worries. So,
Thank you, everybody.
all right. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. Did anyone have any requests for future meeting topics or speakers? Anything they want to hear about, learn about, discuss, determine?
I still.
I don't know. You gave us some fantastic data just now.
Right?
So.
Gave me some, I loaded you up with
I don't know
data.
how you're
So,
going to top this one.
Let's chew on that for a minute, but to your point, and I get the motivation. Take that to the side for a minute. I still think there's a conversation eventually. Maybe y'all already did it in your prior committees last year, so I won't dishonor by saying that you hadn't thought about it. But again, I'm back to seniors and senior housing and a deeper dive on how, and maybe that'll come out in some other body of work that's in play. But just being sensitive, like that's why I was interested in the Jim Chapman. Like, okay, but our seniors, the boomers, they've been saying in different meetings, like, okay, but what about us?
sure. Sure.
We're not broke necessarily. We're about to sell our house. We want to downsize. What are the options for seniors? As you said, independent living, age neutral, whatever it's called. What's it
Age
called?
targeted.
Age targeted and stuff. So, it's just that thought as we plan. Again, so just something as a future topic, perhaps around a little bit more focus on that senior, that emerging boomers who like looking for options. They want to stay in Douglas. And they want nice. They want smaller, but they don't want cheap. They're like, look, I want quality back to. So that topic at some point in the future.
Okay. We'll look into that.
And James, to that note, do we have any knowledge of any senior living areas being built inside the city? Or is there any current projects going on?
So I know for sure, Travis, you can help me out if you know of any, but I know there's one right here next to the courthouse on Durley. That's supposed to be a senior, kind of just this side of the Chick-fil-A, but on the opposite side of the road. If you've seen that where they're grading out, I believe that's supposed to be a senior, some kind of senior housing right there. So I'm not sure about county, citywide, anywhere else, but I am aware of that one. Travis, do you know of any others?
I do believe that they have another one on Douglas Boulevard at Stewart Parkway that's going in right now.
Okay. So you have several coming online throughout the county. So, but yeah, we'll definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah. In relation to Commissioner Robinson's comment, as it was shown back on that chart, I believe Allison had, there was a lot of interest in senior living in Douglas County.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind going forward. And that I have received the new comprehensive plan, but I have not read through it because it's like a phone book. So I trust there's some information in there about senior housing and the desire and this need for it. So we'll certainly check into that. So, well, all right. Any other comments from anyone? I appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate all the good information and the discussion that's came out of everything. So.
Yeah, I want to thank each of you for, this presentation. It was really, you did a very good job, Allison and Travis. That was really good information. Vice Chair, you have any more additional comments?
No, just I concur. Excellent work. Excellent work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there be nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting will be on September the 6th. We will see if there's any new data to come up at that time. But again, if you would just please, just a reminder to forward us that information so
Yes,
that Commissioner Robinson and I can share that with our colleagues. But if there be nothing else, we will call this meeting adjourned. And I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Come on, knock me out. Log me out, please, sir.